Well, unfortunately, you've changed the rules again about public comment, so people come prepared for what is typical on the agenda. But let me just jump right into it. I would like to immediately recognize the outstanding work of adults involved in the emasculation process of our boys and young men in attendance at the Jefferson County School District. In 2010-11, these gentlemen by the name of Deputy Greg Eberhardt and Sergeant Jim Parr participated in the handling, also known as the emasculation process, for the law enforcement referral of 430 boys or young men in attendance in Jefferson County schools. With the help of these gentlemen public employees, Jefferson County Schools was able to get rid of 65 of these boys or young men through your expulsion process. For the ones you were not successful in ridding of, again, these gentlemen public employees, Deputy Everhart and Sergeant Jim Parr, helped you suspend 2,266 of these boys or young men. And get this is just the Hispanic population that's tracked. Let's jump right into the white males. Deputy Everhart and Sergeant Jim Parr handled, also known as initiating the emasculation process, of 935 white males or young men in attendance at Jefferson County Schools. With the help of these gentlemen public employees, Jefferson County Schools was able to rid of 143 of them by expulsion. And again, for the ones you were not successful in ridding of, Deputy Everhart and Sergeant Jim Parr helped you suspend 4,453 of these boys or young men. And again, these are just the white, non-Hispanic males in attendance of Jefferson County Public Schools. It's always fitting to the status quo to begin a JeffCO Board of Education meeting presenting an award for adults, many of whom are often awarded for taking kids down, face first into the mud, with the full support of the superintendent and a select handful of elected officials. It's a victory for status quo, and you're doing it on purpose. Congratulations are in order. Congratulations, Dr. Stevenson. Bill Ayers is proud of you. I'd imagine he regrets not being able to sit next to you tonight.
Next we have on our public comment Carol Baum, and Carol is speaking, Ms. Baum, I should say, speaking on the topic of, quote, ways to cut spending. Ms. Baum?
I want to quote, there's an article that I read that was very good on Jason Richwine, who has a PhD, who is a senior policy analyst in domestic policy studies at the Heritage Foundation. Says most public school teachers participate in a traditional defined benefit pension plan, so-called, because benefits are guaranteed to come in the form of regular fixed payments at retirement. In contrast, private sector workers typically have defined contribution plans, 401k plans. Employers may make regular contributions to workers' defined contribution plans, but no specific amount is guaranteed at retirement. Generally speaking, defined benefit plans in the public sector are a bad deal for taxpayers, since benefits accruing to today's workers need not be paid now. States can promise generous benefits without feeling the full fiscal impact for years or even decades. Benefits to workers are guaranteed, meaning taxpayers are ultimately responsible for any shortfalls in their state's pension systems, and there are many shortfalls. It says, furthermore, the complex calculations needed to compare the value of defined benefit plans with defined contribution plans makes it nearly impossible for voters to decide whether public sector benefits are excessive compared to private sector benefits. Defined benefit pensions are also problematic from the perspective of recruiting and retaining teachers. Two economists have examined how the structure of defined benefit pensions creates incentives that pull teachers into the profession at certain ages and push them out at others with no accompanying economic rationale. Seems to me that if this district is truly concerned about students' achievement, there are lots of areas that need to be looked at first before cutting teachers and other needed professionals. Necessary reforms to the pension plan and benefits, along with rewarding teachers by basing tenure decisions on performance in the classroom, are two key areas that need to be examined. By making reforms in this area, our children will have the resources necessary to succeed in schools, will have the funds it needs to pay its debts. It also won't overburden the taxpayers who have been very generous in helping with the cost of education. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baum. Next on our roster we have Mr. Eric Westerhausen. And I'm going to ask Mr. Westerhausen, is this a group or individual? Looks like you have a number of folks on the same topic. A group? Okay, great. So we'll call forward as well Tammy Story, Tina Gardikian, and Suzanne Klung. I think those are all four. Okay, great. Come on up. And your topic is general fund fact check.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Eric Westerhausen. I'm the parent of 2 JeffCO students, and I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Last month at May's Board of Education meeting, a group of speakers rose to state that they were going to address information being put forth that was critical of the school district, information that was either flat wrong or presented wildly out of context. The commitment was to persistently return to correct those distortions as long as necessary. I'm the first speaker in a series tonight that tackle even more misinformation that has been broadcast to the community. Despite my predecessors who at the last meeting had to fact check and set the record straight about inaccurate statements, we've continued to witness completely inaccurate and misleading information being expressed about things like pizza expenses, the district's expenditures relative to inflation.
Mr. Westerhausen, I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Johnson noticed that the clock is wrong. Could you tell us what you just observed?
The clock was started at 2 minutes, and you are a group, so it should be 5.
Oh, okay.
You got it? Okay, so we'll just pick up from...
Okay.
Okay, great. We just want to make sure everyone gets some time.
No worries. Again, despite my predecessors who at the last meeting had to fact check and set the record straight about inaccurate statements, we've continued to witness completely incorrect and misleading information being expressed about things like pizza expenses, the district's expenditures relative to inflation, and the creation of a false choice between either wanting reform or a mill bond package. Despite repeated corrections, the same bad information continues to be disseminated, so we will continue to correct it. At last month's May 3rd board meeting, a speaker addressing the board arguing in opposition to a mill bond made the following statement. Quote, spending from the general funds was $90 million higher in 2010 and 11 than it was in 2004 and 5. Now, to the casual observer, this soundbite about spending without providing context appears to paint a picture of spending that's out of step with ongoing financial constraints. However, having attended numerous district budget meetings myself over the past 5 years, these assertions just didn't sit right with me. So I set out to do some fact checking for myself, and this is what I found. I found that spending from general funds was roughly $90 million higher, not in 2010, 2011, but in 2008, 2009. Of particular importance here, the 2008-2009 budget was adopted before the depth and length of the recession was reached or became apparent. So making that characterization that spending in 2011 was $90 million higher than it was in 2005 would lead the listener to mistakenly conclude that the district was still spending at pre-recession levels and as recently as last year. This is clearly not the case. In fact, each year since 2008-2009, spending from general funds on salaries has decreased. In 2009-2010, general fund spending on salaries was $549 million. In 2010-11, general fund spending on salaries was $532 million. And in the current adopted budget, general fund spending on salaries was $499 million. So the reality is that the district responded to a drastically worsening economic climate in a strategic, prudent, and fiscally responsible manner. They reduced the budget and spent down reserve funds that had been accrued exactly for this type of adverse financial scenario. Another assertion made in last month's meeting that was offered without context is between 2004-2005 and 2009-10, JeffCO had spent $450 million more from the general fund. This increase is greater than the inflation and flies in the face of declining enrollment, end quote. Referring to the cumulative district spending of $450 million over a 7-year period as a standalone statement appears to be presented as a kind of shock value soundbite insinuating overspending and to inflame fiscal sensibilities of voters. But let's break it down. Between 2005-06 and 2009-10, expenditures increased because of voter-approved 2004 mill levy override and Amendment 23. Cumulative inflation of this period was 8%. In 2011-2012, expenditures will be down 6% from 2009-10, 2 years prior, and during a period in which inflation was actually up 4%, so expenditures down 6%, inflation up 4%. In 2012-13, per pupil allocation is below that level that existed in 2007-8, and spending will be below 2007-8 levels. So despite the soundbite treatment, the amounts spent in each fiscal year were not only budgeted for and approved by the board, but they represent the efficient delivery of valuable educational services to JeffCO students during a period of severe resource depletion. With context provided, it reveals JeffCO Public Schools' prudent fiscal leadership in action The cumulative $450 million covers timeframes in which budgets rose and then declined as the district responded to drastically changing economic conditions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next, it looks like we have another group to come forward, and this is Shauna Fritzler. Is that correct, Shauna? Do you have a group with you? Okay. Lisa Cook, Chris Amesco, Amy Woodley. You're a different group. Lisa Cook is a different group. Okay. Shauna, when your group comes forward, looks like you have a group of four coming forward. And or more. We'll have you go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then I'll work quickly to make sure we've got your names checked off the list. Okay.
Jill Penn, I was a late ad.
All right.
Jennifer Webb. Chris Edwards. Diane Conterfuse. Amy Woodley. While playing a game of telephone with a large group of third and fourth grade girls this week, it occurred to me that I'm watching adults do the same thing and purposely. So I'm here to speak again on their inaccurate facts and figures. For example, it's false to say that per pupil funding accounts for only 65% of total school spending. If you go with cost being just instruction and support, the real number is 67. 57 cents per dollar for classroom instruction plus 10 cents for instructional support. 57 plus 10 is 67 every day of the week. The rest of the money goes to special education, 9 cents per dollar, which is still per pupil funding, but for kids with special needs. Maybe just not the kids these folks are talking about, but it does include mine and many others with federal and state mandates. 11 cents per building to hold classes, 8 cents for principals and support staff, and district level administration, 5 cents. So really, if you want to play with those numbers, you could also say 95% of JeffCO revenue stay right in local schools if you want to hold classes in your building and have a principal. But that's not industry standard. The number is 67 without buildings and principals being mandated special ed. Then we were presented the twisting calculations where they used the buildings instead of ignoring them. They used the total JeffCO budget of about $900 million, divide by about 80,000 students, and arrived at 11,000 per pupil in funding. However, the industry standard is to use the general fund dollars, which does not include several categories of funds, including capital buildings. Their inflated figure makes it look like JeffCO spends more than other districts or the state average. Why would you calculate it that way? They say you can't instruct students without buildings, so why would it make sense to leave the cost of buildings out of the calculation? The reason to use only the general fund dollars is because this is the industry standard, and it doesn't make sense to calculate JeffCO's figures one way while all other districts calculate differently. This is a prime telephone game example of how can I criticize this number most viciously? When this happens, the kids aren't being put first. Then we were told, what you will not hear tell federal dollars and grant money have more than made up for these cuts. The finance bill is on its way to the governance desk. It appears that the per pupil funding will not decrease this year. Perhaps there will be additional funding due to the early literacy bill. Specifically, the literacy bill only covers up to 24,000 students in all of Colorado. It hardly covers all of JeffCO's 86,000 students, not to mention all of the thousands more throughout the rest of the state. $700 per student in interest revenue from state land funds will be a mandate to help students with significant reading deficiencies. The law also includes some $5 million in funding to be used for CBE administration costs. Obviously, about $700 for specific students who fit into this program that was refocused on a smaller group of students will be wonderful for those students if that can serve all of JeffCO. State lawmakers have approved a 2012-13 Finance Act that keeps average statewide funding flat at $6,474 per student, but the various factors used to calculate funding for individual districts mean many still face cuts. This is from our state. Those factors include cost of living, higher operating costs, enrollment declines. The bulk of school district revenues are equalized, meaning that the state provides funding to equalize property wealth. So, direct from CDE for JeffCO, we get reduced again to $6,308.92 per pupil, and then others like Pawnee and Weld County receive $15,098.72 per pupil. The School Finance Act also allows school districts some discretion to raise additional local revenue, for which the state provides no equalization. So this is clearly a state issue. We're watching our monies walk away from our schools to help others. which is great for other students. Meanwhile, JeffCO students continue to lose out because of state issues and the state equalization. I won't sit by and watch more taken from our JeffCO kids, and will do what I can through the state to address those issues that our schools and the board have no power over. However, we have the opportunity and power to help our JeffCO kids directly. Please say yes to JeffCO kids and our traditional excellence. No, Bond, yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, applause, please. And we do a silent show of support. There is demonstration in the section. Silent show of support. Next, we have Lisa Cook. And Lisa is here to talk to us tonight on the topic of para rules clarification.
My name is Lisa Cook. I'm the parent of a JeffCO second grader and a 2-year-old future JeffCO student. In recent months, several people have suggested that budget cuts could be minimized by asking district employees to take up additional contributions to para. I'm here tonight to point out that para employee contribution rates are decided only by the state legislature. By law, para employee contribution rates cannot be negotiated or changed by the JeffCO Board of Education, nor by the teachers union, nor by any other bargaining group. Increasing the employee contribution rate requires legislation at the Capitol. Anyone who wants to see those changes needs to contact their state representatives and ask them to sponsor a bill. Complaining here merely wastes everyone's time. Let me reiterate that. By law, the Board of Education is not allowed to change para contribution rates in any way, shape, or form. Only the Colorado General Assembly can increase the employee contribution rates. Second, some have argued that the mill levy revenues have been gobbled up by para contributions. Specifically, some have claimed that the 2004 mill levy raises about $35 million extra per year, but para employee contributions have increased to $36 million more and gobbled up the mill levy. That's also false. The fact is that over 7 years, the mill levy generated an estimated $169.5 million above and beyond para increases. That's approximately 2.5 times more than the amount of para increases. The 2004 mill levy worked. I hope the board will give voters the opportunity to pass the mill levy again this November. And finally, I want to remind those who believe that the 8% para contribution rate needs to be raised that opposing a mill levy will not change those rates. It can't. Only your state representatives can. That's who you need to be talking to if you want to see a change. Take it to the Capitol. Please don't take it out of the
Thank you. Next, we have Laura Gillis.
Members of the board, thank you for the opportunity. I would also like to thank our public for doing their homework. Much of what the clarification that I had planned to provide has been clarified accurately by the public. First off, I want to start out by saying that following the Arvada Roundtable Community Meeting on Friday, June 1st, district staff was contacted for clarification of information presented by board member Boggs. This is not the first time we've been requested to provide clarification, but I do think it's important that our community understands the facts. So just to begin, and I will cut this short based on the community member comments, but board member Boggs continues to tie para to the mill levy override. That is simply not true. Again, the General Assembly sets para rates, and the para contributions by the employer will be paid regardless of the mill levy override. Another comment made at the Arvada Roundtable is that district employees will receive both Social Security and para benefits. Ms. Boggs has again erroneously stated that district employees will receive both para benefits and Social Security, leading the public to believe that the district contributes to both para and Social Security. The district, like other para employers, does not contribute to Social Security on behalf of employees. The district is a para employer. Employees who have worked for other employers and achieved earning credits under Social Security are eligible to receive Social Security at a reduced rate.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Bell.
It's funny. Steve Bell, Chief Operating Officer of the district, and I do have some points of clarification based upon what I think is erroneous misstatements that I've heard from last week, also from one of our board members, that would be Ms. Fox. Statement has been made that the district is not tonight going to be considering a bond issue of the size of $99 million, but rather we are rolling over $300 million of bonds. That's both constitutionally and statutorily illegal. So it can't be done. So that statement is completely false. And I would tell you, as one of the members of our district that helped prepare this information, I quite frankly am insulted for our office, our district, and our community that such things get represented as being factual. Second is that the district is not asking for a $99 million bond issue, but rather a $399 million bond issue. That also is completely false. Can't be done. You will authorize, if you decide to go forward tonight, a par amount of bonds that will be issued, and that will be stated very clearly in the ballot language. The Constitution is very clear about the way the language is stated, the factuality of the numbers, and the accuracy of the information presented. And again, it's unfortunate that we have to have these things happen. But I thought it important for the board to realize there's factual information and there's also been very serious misrepresentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Next on our list, I think, but I'm going to double check, is someone who may have been with one of our earlier groups, Diane, I believe. Bunkett? Can't quite read the handwriting of the last name. But
Diane, you have very fancy handwriting. It's illegible.
We just can't. Is this ringing a bell for anyone?
Yes, it's me. I stood up already.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It is elegant.
Next up, we have Lynn Setzer.
They're all lining up tonight.
Good evening, I'm Lynn Setzer, I'm the Executive Director of Communications for the district, and thank you, members of the board, for the opportunity to talk about the value of school communications and public relations. Recently, some members of the community have questioned the worth of the communications department to the district and how our work affects student achievement. I'd like to read from Board Policy KD, which established the communications department for JeffCO Public Schools.
$500,000.
Quote, educational public relations is a planned and systematic management function designed to help improve the programs and services of JeffCO Public Schools. It relies on a comprehensive two-way communications process involving both internal and external publics with the goal of fostering student achievement, end quote. A strong communications team helps principals and teachers whose focus is student achievement. We tell our community about all of the great things that are happening in our schools, our outstanding teachers and students. We communicate with parents about new initiatives and changes that will affect their families. We support principals when a crisis happens at their school. We hear over and over again that we need to communicate more, not less, with our stakeholders. My team consists of award-winning professionals who specialize in public relations, marketing, web design, media, social media, and video production. We are Emmy Award-winning journalists. Our publications consistently win awards from both regional and national organizations. We handle Colorado Open Records requests, write letters home for principals, publish weekly and monthly newsletters for employees, parents, and other stakeholders, produce videos, coordinate events, update websites, and much, much more. The value of a communications team is reflected in the fact that most medium to large school districts in the country have one. In closing, I and my team take great pride in serving JeffCO's students, parents, and communities.
And she didn't compare the $500 million JeffCO pays for theirs to other districts.
The mill bond vote that's before the board this evening. And we begin tonight with Tamara Van Nordstrand. Tamara Van Nordstrand. Hello.
Good evening. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and present to you. Before I do my little spiel, I'd like to personally thank you for myself and the Governor's Ranch community, the time that you all put into and the personal sacrifices you made for our school district. We know your job is stressful and we appreciate what you do for us. And we know that you have a true dedication to our JeffCO students. But I also want to point out that the Governor's Ranch community has that same dedication. And that's why I'm here tonight. We have a petition here of 160 signatures that we obtained in 2 days that support the mill levy and bond. The families in Governor's Ranch are passionate about our great school and proud to be part of the JeffCO School District. Not only for our families, but for all of the families and students in JeffCO, we want the best education possible. We can't maintain our success with future cuts in teachers and resources or larger class sizes. The families of Governor's Ranch believe that a mill levy and bond will ensure that our kids continue to receive the best possible education by having enough teachers for reasonable class sizes and sufficient educational support staff. We believe educational enhancements, such as outdoor lab, are unique to our school district, and we want every JeffCO student to have that. We need and want full-time teacher librarians and instructional coaches so that our teachers can have the educational support that make our kids successful. We'll work hard to support and educate the voters and ask you to please vote unanimously for that no levy bond.
Thank you. Next, we have Michelle Patterson, and the topic is PTA resolutions related to the bond and mill.
Nancy McCandless, JeffCO Council PTA Executive Board.
I'm Shawna Fritzone, I'm for the VP of Communications for JeffCO. And I'm Michelle Patterson, I'm the president of JeffCO PTA. At the April board meeting, former JeffCO PTA president Carrie Lee spoke stating the JeffCO PTA board of directors had resolved to support the placement of a mill and bond on the November ballot. And should the measures be placed on the ballot, further resolved to support their passage. We asked local units to bring this same resolution to their membership for a vote. I am pleased to report the following PTAs in Jefferson County have voted to support a mill and bond. Arvada West High School, Bear Creek K-8, Belmar Elementary, Betty Adams Elementary, Creighton Middle School, Drake Middle School, Fairmount Elementary, Fitzmaurice Elementary, Glennon Heights Elementary, Golden High School, Gray Mountain High School, Hackberry Hill Elementary, Kiffin Elementary, Meiklejohn Elementary, Mitchell Elementary, North Arvada Middle School, Parmalee Elementary, Pfeiffer Elementary, Powderhorn Elementary, Red Rocks Elementary, Ralston Elementary, Ryan Elementary, Semper Elementary, Shelton Elementary, Slater Elementary, South Lakewood Elementary, the Manning School, Welchester Elementary, Westwoods Elementary, Westgate Elementary, and Wheat Ridge High School. We even heard from Jefferson County Open School, a PTSO, also resolved to support a mill and bond. In addition, several PTAs have reported they plan to bring the resolution to a vote of their membership at their first meeting of the 2012-2013 school year. As you can see, there is broad support for these measures.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Next, we have Charlie Regan.
I'm ready. Good evening. First, I want to compliment you folks, these kids I saw here tonight, these students, and the progress they're making. And it certainly is heartening to see this, and in spite of the budget cuts for the last couple of years. Looks like they're doing pretty well. I have a question about, I've had questions about what Ms. Gillis talked about in the expel concerning the mill levy override, 34 million. My understanding was that 20 million of that was going to be be used to offset the JCA para, the district's contribution. And the other 14 million was going to be used to backfill furlough days that were cut this year. I understand now from those two people that this may not be true. In the information that I've seen in your website, a figure of $1.23, $1.23 comes out as the amount related to $100,000 in property value. Well, I come up with $3.07 instead of $1.23. And then going through the calculations, the tax increase is a 15.11% increase in taxes, property taxes in Jefferson County. If that's not true, I'd like you to point that out and show me how you get it. In the meantime, I have a question. What value have you gotten from the $5 million you've spent on smart boards in terms of documented student achievement? And I hope you folks have a nice summer, and we'll be all set to work on the mill levy. One parting shot is I compliment you for following tables, going to the public with your mill levy increases that add more people.
Thank you, Mr. Regan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tina Gardikian to also again speak on the issue of the no bond.
I can see November from Wisconsin. That's all I gotta say.
My name is Tina Regan. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you this evening. At the April board meeting, I notified the board that I had started a petition to gain support for placing the bond and mill levy override on the November ballot. On May 29th, I closed the petition and emailed you the petition and signatures. And I want to bring you the results this evening. The petition is 136 pages long and has 2,373 signatures of people who would like to see the JeffCO Board of Education vote to place a bond and mill levy override on the ballot. I had a field in the petition where people could identify what their neighborhood school is. I went through all signatures to determine to what extent across the county there is support for this campaign. The petition has signees from all across JeffCO, specifically from 90 out of 94 of JeffCO's elementary schools, all 22 middle schools, all 17 high schools, and 9 of the 24 charter and option schools. Our children have come to expect excellence from their schools, and they deserve it. Faced with $43 to $45 million in projected cuts for the 2013-2014 school year, we need relief now. Therefore, on behalf of the 2,373 people who signed the petition, I am asking the board to vote tonight to place the bond and mill levy override on November's ballot. Thank you for your consideration and dedication to our children. And I'm going to hand him this spreadsheet of all the schools that have representation on the petition. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next, we have Melissa, I believe it's pronounced Lifelight.
Very good.
Yeah? Oh, good.
It's very durable.
I'll give her Lifelight, you know. Okay, you've got some.
She's president of your fan club? You fan
And we'll ask everyone to introduce themselves.
Jennifer Webb.
Kristen Rhines.
Kohler.
Renee Harris. Alyssa Williams. Amy Fago.
Deb Gaducci.
My name is Melissa Lifehide, and I'm a parent of 2 at John Elementary. I'm also on the accountability team and a board member of the PTA. Standing behind me are parents and teachers from John. On behalf of both John Accountability and PTA, I'm proud to say that we support the Board of Education putting the mill and bond on the ballot, and we support the mill and bond. On a personal note, as simply a parent, I'm very concerned about the future funding of our schools. I've never been a particularly politically active person. I have my opinions and I have exercised my right to vote, but for the most part, I generally keep my political views to myself. Saving JeffCO schools, however, is too important for me to continue to be quiet. We owe it to our children, we owe it to our community, and to the future well-being of our country
This is coming from me, a person who was raised to be a good Republican and say no to tax increases. It was a core belief of my family growing up, and it is a belief they hope to pass on to me. But when it comes to education, I don't know how we can say no. If we aren't willing to fund education, I don't know what we are willing to fund. I've heard many people say that JeffCO schools, or any district really, is mismanaging taxpayers' money. They could cut administration costs, they could cut athletics, they could cut all sorts of things before they cut teachers and increase class sizes. To those people, I would say that I don't necessarily disagree. I have no doubt that efficiencies could be gained, and large organizations such that JeffCO school district is, we've all seen it, there's waste and money is spent in ways we don't agree. So let's rally around that. Let's get involved and change the way money is spent. But we all know that isn't going to be a speedy process. It will take time. In the meantime, let's not allow the students of JeffCO schools to suffer. Let's not put our fiscal ideologies on the backs of our children. In the meantime, let's spend the $5 a month or so per family to educate our children and to ensure the success of our country. We have to continue to raise our future doctors, lawyers, scientists, teachers, and Board of Education members. This is too important to do anything less. I am willing to pay $5 per month and skip a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Thank you very much. Next we have Laura Villapoldi.
Good evening. I'm Laura Villapoldi. I'm here today to speak on behalf of my two children who are just beginning their education in JeffCO. It's very hard to envision their future when I see the babysitters who just graduated with so many benefits. My daughter will be the class of 2024. Things will look a lot different if we do not have this no levy and bond on November ballot, and if we do not pass it. We will most certainly see our children's class sizes increase. In many cases, we are talking about class sizes that are already exploding. A few weeks ago, the Denver Post did a feature on public schools and the arguments that repeatedly float around about whether smaller class sizes are critical or not. Although the educators and educational professionals working at the Colorado Department of Education that the Post quoted were on different sides of the argument, they did appear to agree that for kindergarten through third grade, maintaining class sizes between 20 to 25 kids is very important for these young learners. My daughter just finished kindergarten with 28 kids in her class. She is looking at 30 plus kids in her first grade class. There is a school just a few miles from us that is looking at 30 kids in their fall kindergarten classes. In many schools, we are already well above the ideal number of kids in classrooms in these critical early grades. Many of our class sizes throughout the district are already beyond what the Colorado Department of Education believes is best. We can do something to stop this situation from getting worse. Why don't we? Why don't you let the voters decide? If we don't address our funding crisis now, when? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have David Brazel speaking to the bond and mill, specifically charter school participation.
I'm David Brazel. My daughters attend Weston Academy, one of 14 fine JeffCO charter schools. A group of charter school leaders and I have been meeting since '08. One of the main issues we have focused on is the bond and mill override. My peers and I want to ensure that all the details of the district's plan for the bond and mill dollars to charter schools is ironclad and follows the specifics of the plan with fidelity before we are able to give the final stamp of approval as the entire group and then engage in the campaign work. I can tell you we are close to that point and do feel positive about the direction this is going. Once everything is in writing and clear, then expect our full support and this endorsement of the Colorado League of Charter Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Byron Gale with Citizens for JeffCO Schools.
here to support the mill bond initiative.
I'm John Anderson.
My name is Bill Lee. I am the husband of the past PTA president, and I would like to make a clarification for Mr. Rebar. The smart boards were bought by PTA, not the district.
Yeah. She just mic'd him.
Right. Please hold
She
your
just
applause.
mic'd him.
First and parent formal PTA president.
Good one. Did you see that? Like a microphone.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak again. I'll take 5 minutes. It's an honor. I'm a parent of 2 kids in the JeffCO public school system, a 3rd grader and a 5th grader at Wilmot. I apologize, I couldn't apply through this material. I chair the Wilmot Accountability Council, and I'm also vice president of an energy company here in Denver, engineer by degree, and I'm representing Citizens for JeffCO Schools. Here is a little bit about Citizens for JeffCO Schools. Basically, it's a group of parents, business leaders, and citizens concerned about the future of JeffCO schools. You can see our leadership outlined in the middle of the slide. It's a large and growing team, and we're leading the effort to generate support for the mill bond package. We're eagerly anticipating the green light tonight from the board, so we can launch a campaign to get this passed in November. What's on the table is the $39 million mill levy override, $99 million bond package, of course, to help provide a bridge to the economy and to help JeffCO public schools continue their tradition of excellence. A lot of folks on board with this initiative already. Here's a list of a sampling of JeffCO leaders who have indicated support. And what will it cost us? It's basically less than $15 per year per $100,000 of home value, which is $1.23 per month. So if one were to own an average JeffCO home of $250,000 in value, that calculates to $3.05 per month, which is a dime a day. I've looked back at every mill levy override in Colorado back to the beginning of time, and I focused on the last 4 years when the economy was tough. Yet, there are some encouraging numbers here. Nearly half of them passed, and with the right grassroots strategic campaign, I like our chances here. I've also researched every bond election result back at the beginning of time, and here's a summary of the last 4 years. 32 have passed out of 62, 52% success rate. And you can see some of the schools and the values that have passed and failed in JeffCO's history at the bottom. In terms of spending, I've pointed out before that the studies we've done at Wilmot, and here's the results of 2 of them, indicate that Colorado is near the bottom of 50 states when it comes to per pupil instructional spending or average teacher salary. We're 47th in one study and 49th in the other. And we've all seen this plot and seen the departure of Colorado per pupil spending back in the mid-'80s to the tune of $2,500 under the national average currently. Yet JeffCO has done a great job of strategically making the cuts, making the reductions, looking for efficiencies and savings in the budget to the tune of over $63 million in the past 3 years. And this includes what was mentioned before, how they put the money in the classroom. 84 cents on the dollar right into the classroom. 11 cents for operations and maintenance of facilities, 5 cents for the general administration. Relative to the general fund, this shows again the fiscal responsibility and accountability, how the district, how JeffCO Public Schools has balanced the budget relative to state revenues. And you can see over a 4-year period how those dollars, the absolute dollars, have come down. You can also see the focus on spending when you put it on a per pupil funding basis. And of course, nice decrease. And this bucks inflation, cost of service increases, even though the at-risk population might be going up. In terms of real estate, we presented before 3 case studies that show perhaps 11% premium, 17% premium, 16% premium on home value when you're in an area of good quality schools. But we wanted to look closer to home, so we looked at Douglas County, 2008, and they had prepared information indicating that 2% to 10% of your home value would be directly tied to the value of the school district. And the quote at the bottom from a realty group, that school quality is the most important cause of variation in constant quality home prices. In terms of taxes, we've indicated that Colorado is the 39th lowest when it comes to state and local taxes, and even based on value. I'll skip ahead to my last slide. And I can leave you with 4 takeaways. We definitely see a correlation between school funding, quality, and real estate values. We have room in the tax base in Colorado. We're second lowest and fifth lowest in these 2 studies in terms of what we pay our teachers. And the middle bond would go a long way to help bridge the gap to a better economy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. Next, we have Sheila Atwell, and joining Ms. Atwell is Dee Oldmans, Judy Merkel, and Stacy Klein. From JeffCO students first. Oh, fire.
Thank you once again for the opportunity to address the board. I appreciate having so many folks here questioning my statistics, and I want to be sure that you know that I have no intention of misleading anybody. I can't imagine what the reason would be why I would do that. If our schools fail, we all fail, and all the discussion we have heard has implied that extra spending means quality schools. Dollars mean better schools, and I just don't see that being the case. I think we need to look at lots of other things. So anyhow, so of course, we agree that outstanding public schools are important for all of us. What do excellent schools have in common? They have high expectations for teachers and students, more rigorous curriculum, strong principal leadership, and flexibility. So what I'm going to show going forward, since I have so much less time here, the statistics, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you appreciate this of JeffCO schools. So first on this slide, I've got graduation rates, which stubbornly remain below 8%, which means 20% of our kids are not graduating, and an increasing number that require remediation when they go to college. It's just a fact, it's from this website. Secondly, I've got third grade reading scores. Again, pretty flat. It doesn't look like there's been much increase. 1,200 kids falling below proficient in advanced. If that's good enough, we can compare poverty rates and excuse those numbers because of a child's economic circumstances. We would rather not do that and see that every child has a quality education. 10th grade math scores, again, 42% are passing in 2011. And again, you can compare the numbers to the state numbers and decide whether or not the state average is a benchmark that that is high enough and good enough for you. Next is ACT scores. Since 2006, this is the average for college-bound high schoolers. The average Hispanic ACT score is just 18. So and then the college admittance scores are much higher than that. So the question for us is, has money fixed the problem? We would say it's not how much you spend, but how you spend it. And for the record, this is where I got my expenditure figures. It's directly out of my copy here from the annual report. And then I list going back to 2005, expenses and revenues. This is operating expenditures. I heard folks that were confused as to the difference between general fund expenditures and adding the capital expenditures. But let's look at it in a graph, and you can see where I've gotten my 90 million figure and my 450 million figure. Please do show me your sources. I've heard a couple people question these, and I can show you exactly where in the reports I got them. And indeed, if they're wrong, I would appreciate knowing how. So the real question is whether or not money matters. You can decide whether or not you saw improvement in student achievement, but how did we get here? I'm very happy again to share all of my data points. If folks have a question about how I calculated inflation, where I got it, where I got salary expenses or operating expenses. So you can see the rate of increase is twice what inflation was, and you can decide if the money was well spent or not based upon the changes in student achievement. This is about students after all. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about para because I'm confused, and I'd love to hear more about the research that you all have done, but you add in the para increases, and those expenses are hugely higher than what the general expenses were, the increases. Now, the change that I mentioned, 31 million more since 2004 now, since 2004, we are spending the bulk of that mill levy goes into the para account. And I know it is statutorily required that we contribute a certain percentage. However, I will say that you had in your earlier conversations with the community, they did say save the money by asking the employees to pick up the para expense. And Ms. Noonan and I had lunch once, and she even said, yeah, that was on the table, but you had elected to do the furlough days instead. So here are the para matching percentages. That's what happened at the summit, apparently. And I can show you the paperwork before the summit and after the summit. Before the summit, the community said please ask them to pick up the matching para. So here's the difference and the increase. And I know absolutely they don't get Social Security benefits unless they do work outside the district. And I was at that meeting that someone referred to in Arvada, and Ms. Fox did not ever say that employees get Social Security as well, unless, of course, they worked any time outside the district. So here, real quick, is just a comparison of para benefits versus Social Security benefits. So we're asking for a tax increase. I understand that it's a small increase, but when we're asking the citizens of JeffCO, well, thank you. Well, I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Next, John Anderson, the Citizens for JeffCO Schools. Or John, our...
They allow us to fire.
Perfect, okay. Our veteran that we just heard from the environment. We'll now take public comment for our public hearing on the budget. We have one person who has signed up. So we will call that person forward. And the guidelines I announced earlier for public comments apply here as well. So with that, I'd like to invite Mark Williams to come forward. And his topic, as part of the budget hearing, is efficiency effectiveness.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for your public service. I know we spent a lot of time on this. The proposed budget tells a story about what JeffCO's management and the board wants to do, and I'm afraid that it's not a good story, and it's going to be translated. We're going to summarize it by saying it's tax, borrow, burn, spend. That is what the story of your current proposed budget is. You want to increase taxes, you want to borrow more money, you want to burn the rest of the reserves that you burned through the last 5 years, and you want to spend more. When there are no studies that I'm aware of in JeffCO or anywhere else in the country, and we've conducted thousands of them, that class size impacts student performance, that spending impacts student performance, that mainstreaming special ed kids improves anybody's performance, and that more money means better education. So you're playing chicken with the state legislature and with our taxpayers. You're trying to force the state to cover your property tax shortfalls. That's what it says in your budget summary. You want the state to cover the gap. Well, guess what? They're not going to. You've lost 5 years in a row. You're going to lose the 6th. So you're telling the taxpayers, look, if you don't give us more money, we're going to cut sports and music. Well, that's a pretty transparent argument, isn't it? That's a coercive argument to those of us who live here, own property here, employ people here, to say, if you don't give us more money so that we can tax, borrow, burn, and spend more, we'll cut out music and athletics, which is irrational because those are the two cheapest things that you do except have lunch and study hall. So apparently you don't understand your costs as you should, and I wish you would ask your finance people to figure out what stuff costs and what works. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Williams. The board is going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume with the rest of the agenda.